Today we're going to look at how to add a change in study cycle template on the portal. So first of all, we log into the site. Now, as a reporter, you have access to the following tabs. There's a dashboard tab, which is where you will land when you enter the portal. You also have the report tab and the plan tab. The dashboard tab obviously shows you the dashboard, and that's all the questions that are coming up from your surveys. In future, it will also include information around longer term data, such as your participation rates in kindergarten and maternal and child health attendance. The report tab is where we add the PDSAs, but I'll get to that in a moment. The plan tab is where the facilitator will have put in the logic model for your site. And so this logic model can be clicked on at any time so that you can actually have a look at what the logic model is that you're working toward at your partnership. Below that, you'll find groundworks, and these are the basis that of the work that you are doing, and so any PDSA will relate to a groundwork. So you can see here that there's the outcome areas listed. So there's 6 potential short-term outcome areas that could be listed here. So these are standards, but the logic strategies are local strategies. These relate strictly to what's in your logic model. So if we were to view this one here around improving cultural safety of ECEC services, if I click on view, then you can see here that it's got the logic model name and it's got the groundwork code, which is generated by the system. What the title is actually entered by the facilitator, and then the outcome area. We have a stretch goal that's devised in the logic model, and again, there's a logic model strategy. The change ideas here are put in by the facilitator. So if you are wanting to put in a PDSA that doesn't have a relevant change idea listed, then you will need to contact your facilitator and ask them to add an additional idea to this list, so that then you can do that when you come to adding in the PDSA. So we can go back to the plan, and that just shows you these again, so you can see how many change ideas currently exist in each of those areas. If we go to the report tab now, then we'll be able to add a PDSA. Before I get to adding the PDSA, I just wanted to show this feature up on the right here. You can actually select it so that you're only seeing the PDSAs that have been completed by you. And so that if there is a long list of PDSAs and you just want to check on yours, then this is a good filter to put into place. Now, to add a PDSA, we simply click on the Add PDSA button. Now, the first thing we do is select the groundwork that it relates to. So in this case, we'll do a cultural safety PDSA. And the PDSA title might be Acknowledgement of Country. Into daily practice. Now, as you can see, it doesn't actually fit all of that content, so we'll just put incorporate acknowledgement of country. As long as I know what that means, that's the most important thing. Now, we can put in a start date here. When we put in the start date, this will these are fixed, so you can't actually modify these once these are put in, but they are only indicative timeframes. So we'll make it a 2-week PDSA in this one, and we'll click on create. Now you can see here that the new PDSA report has been created and it's been allocated a code. So we can proceed now. So this is the crux of the PDSA report. Some of that information is already incorporated onto this standard template because of what has been done in the previous screen. So you've got this information here. You can see the date that's been created. We can see the groundwork that it relates to, the PDSA code that's been system generated, the PDSA title, which I put in, but of course you can at this point edit that if needed. Now, if you wanted to go into to find out which PDSA it follows, it might follow, for instance, maybe it's around this one here, around cultural safety. We don't know what that one actually is, but this is what we could do. So here, This could be to test an idea from local elders to improve cultural safety. That could be the change idea that we're using, because the local elders could have suggested that we incorporate an acknowledgement of country into our daily practice. So this part here is the next part around planning, is what we look at when we want to enter all the details of what's going to be undertaken. However, we want it to be really brief. We don't want to have a whole lot of background information in here. We want it to be as short and sharp as possible, because we don't want the reporting onus to be really strong for you, because obviously no one has time for that kind of stuff. Just to go down to the bottom, I just wanted to show that you can actually leave open and continue editing later. So I'll just show you what happens when you do that. I'll click on update, and it says that it's been updated and they're available. So you can see here, this is the PDSA that we've just done. So if I wanted to now edit it, I could do that. You can also see that any of the PDSAs that aren't done by this user of Rachel Demo are only available to view. You can't actually see them to edit them. You can print them, but you can only edit the ones that are your PDSAs. So we'll go back in by clicking on the edit button. And I'll just show the information that we need to include here. So in terms of what tasks or activities will be undertaken to achieve the change idea, here we'll say the teacher will include an acknowledgement of country. Sorry, I need to be able to type faster, but anyway. Acknowledgement of country into the daily circle time. The educator will ask children what they are thankful for about the country in which they live, and link that to the Aboriginal connection with country. So basically, it's just a couple of lines that we put into the what. We don't want to have huge amounts of information, and we want it to be really clear about what it is that's going to be done. So in this case, it's just a case of the teacher will include an acknowledgement of country, and the educator is going to ask the kids what they think, what they're thankful for around country, and then connect that with the Aboriginal connection with country as part of the acknowledgement. So in terms of who is responsible for each aspect, it's the educator and we put in a kindergarten name, so I'll just put in this case an imaginary kindergarten. So this is where we start to think in the next field. It's where we start to think about if there's any leave plans or events. So perhaps there's a public holiday coming up or something like that that might actually impact on the amount of time that you can do the PDSA for. And so are there any leave plans? In this case, we'll put none noted. It's just a good thing to get in the habit of thinking about. So in terms of where will the plan be executed, it's going to be at Greenfields Kindergarten. And we can put in, say, Rosella Room. What do we predict will happen? This is a really important thing to think about, what you're predicting, because we want to make sure that we have change ideas that are tested, that have the capacity to influence and to actually lead to improvement. So having a prediction also helps. So in this case, we think what might happen as a result is that children will be more aware of Aboriginal culture and the Aboriginal history of Australia. Additionally, it will lead to a greater sense of cultural inclusion for any Aboriginal families attending the service. So obviously our ultimate goal at the start was cultural safety. So we want cultural safety for Aboriginal families. That's our goal. And so obviously this prediction is in line with that particular outcome. Are there any barriers or risks? So in this case, it might be that it might be that the educator is going away, which could have been mentioned previously in the leave area. But we might say that there's the kindergarten year. It might be that we don't necessarily have, because it is the start of the kindergarten year, it might be really chaotic and there might be a lot of things going on. So that might be impacting. If so, how do we intend to work around those? We'll test the idea and see if it needs adapting in response to this start of year. So in terms of what data we will need to see if the change has led to our prediction, we could have some information around surveys. So we could have some surveys that suggest that Aboriginal families aren't feeling welcomed at a particular service. That might be one of the measures that you could use, that you would want to see a change in that to hopefully improve. However, what you might see is you need to be able to do the things that you can actually measure. So there might be some things such as your baseline data may be nothing when we come to this part, but what you might want to see is the number of children who participate and acknowledge country. It might also be the number of children speaking about Aboriginal culture in their daily routines. It may be the number of parents. How you actually measure that is up to you, and what it will be in a way that will be meaningful to you to show that it's actually led to some kind of improvement. So what it is that you're trying to achieve and how you can measure that. And so when it comes to baseline data, in this case, you would have probably 0 as your baseline data, because you wouldn't have any children necessarily who had been speaking about Aboriginal culture before, or who hadn't been, they certainly wouldn't have been participating in the acknowledgement of country because it hadn't been done. So your baseline data can be 0. And what you can do when you start measuring later to see what the impact has been, you can add in some qualitative and quantitative data. So you can actually speak to the impact that has been made. So I'm just putting the baseline there. So then we get to the doing section. So let's assume that we have started this on the 24th. And what we do here is this is just talking about exactly what's happened. So we don't need this to be a really long, epic description of what's happened. We want it to be as brief as possible. That just describes what was done. So in this case, we might just say the test was implemented as described above. And we didn't have any, the impact of the start of year was not problematic. The kids loved Okay, so you can see it's just really simple information. Now, I'll put the start date here. Now, the actual start date in terms of the way that PDSAs are counted on our system, the start date is based on the do section, not the one that you put in earlier as indicative dates. So this is where it comes down to when it was actually done. And so we're only going to run it for a week, just to test it for a week and see if we need to have any changes made, etc. So PDSA was implemented as planned. We think it would be good to bring some materials from outside into the acknowledgement entry to really strengthen the link with the land. This may include tree, bring whole trees in, etc. Now, did the change idea meet the prediction? We don't have any Aboriginal families currently attending, so we cannot gauge whether we just put in some information, and it can be really brief, doesn't have to be very long at all. So what are the key learnings? Children enjoyed the experience and were more connected with Aboriginal culture and the history of the land on which they live and play. In terms of the change data, we may have noticed that there were three children speaking about Aboriginal customs in the playground. And, you know, you might have 25 children. Let's do 22. 22 children engaged in the circle time. So in terms of what will happen now, we're going to adapt it, and that's going to be based on the fact that we think that we could bring in some more things from outside, such as branches or leaves. Okay, so that's sufficient. It doesn't have to be really, really detailed. And so at the moment, it says underway as the status. Now, this is a complete PDSA now. It's contained all of the information. Now, generally speaking, just to come back to this ACT section, generally what happens is that the ACT is actually done in consultation with a number of people in the partnership. So while in this instance we had this Greenfields kindergarten that was actually doing the testing, what would normally happen is it might come back to a couple of people in the partnership, sort of like a working group, I guess, that have a real focus on, like, their particular focus is on improving cultural safety for Aboriginal families in early childhood services. And so that particular group might come back and look at what was happening in the playground, and that kind of group discussion helps to foster the ideas, so that it's not just necessarily a decision that's made by the one service, but it's actually made by multiple services potentially who are working toward the same goal. That's the ideal situation for a PDSA when it comes to the ACT section. So what will happen is that the rest of the information will be done by the people who are doing the PDSA. But when it comes to the ACT, the decision on whether to adapt, adopt or abandon should be done in consultation with others, so that we share that learning, we share the decision making as well in terms of what could be tried, and we get greater input from others around different ideas. Now, we very rarely adopt a PDSA after one test. We really should be running them through multiple cycles, which is why the PDSAs are very short. We want to be able to test that they have the same impact on an ongoing basis, as opposed to just adopting after one cycle. So if we run this through, say, 3 times and we've changed it, etc., and then it just becomes part of everyday practice, then we select adopt once we'd made that decision to actually embed it into practice. If it really wasn't working, then we could always abandon it. But in this case, we're going to adapt it and try and bring in some, leaves and etc. When it comes down to the bottom here, because this is actually completed now, what we would normally do is we would click close and submit to the site facilitator and update. The other option is that you can also transfer to a different person. So any of the reporters at your site will be listed on this list here, and you'll be able to transfer to one of those if that's what you need to do. So, and if you were to transfer, you would just click on the transfer button and then update. But in this case, we're going to close and submit to the site facilitator. We could also delete the report if needed. So we've updated it now. And so now you can see that it's the status of the report has changed to submitted, and now we can only view it. So the only person now who can edit this report is the facilitator. And so we can't do anything to this report now until the facilitator approves the report or sends it back to us for further information to be input. So that is how we enter a PDSA on the system. If you've got any questions, feel free to give me a call on the number that is listed in the guide. Thank you.